Chapter 347 Completely healed immediately after, a dazzling white light beam descended from the sky. Along with the beam came an immense force of spiritual power pushing down on the medicinal field. When the beam of light made contact, it quickly spread. In the blink of an eye, it covered every inch of the ground in the medicinal field. To add on to that, all the warriors standing in the middle of the light beam seemed to be isolated from everyone else. They seemed to have become invisible. Nobody could see or hear them anymore. Everyone couldn't help but panic. Most of all, this group of people who just experienced the impact of intoxicated blood poison. At this moment, their hearts were filled with fear of the unknown. Nangong Yu's response quickly covered Hashi and Qing Long with his void spiritual barrier. Wu Yu waited for everyone else to be enveloped. However, just as he was about to pull Hashi into his embrace, a green beam quickly shot towards Hashi. For a moment, Hashi didn't even process what had happened. She only felt a boom in her head, and following that, everything in front of her eyes changed. After returning back to her soul, Hashi found herself in both an unfamiliar yet familiar place. She said it was familiar because this was the place she had met the little golden dragon and lifted its seal. She said it was unfamiliar because this originally dusky and narrow space had undergone some large changes. The whole space had become gold and jade in glorious splendor, too. There were countless night pearls hanging from the ceiling, giving off a soft yet bright light. Originally, there were fuzzy mirrors all around, but now, they all seemed clear. The mirror showed the scene inside the secret territory, including Nangong Yu and everyone else's images. However, currently, the images in the mirror were all frozen, as if time had completely stopped in the secret territory. There was suspicion in Hashi's heart. She secretly thought, could it be that because the little golden dragon ate the divine dragon fruit and woke up, bringing her back to his original nest? At this moment, she heard the little golden dragon's old and decrepit voice. "Woman, at least one can say you have a good heart. You know that Benzang, 3, got such an injury in order to save you, so you obtained the divine dragon fruit for Benzang. At least Benzang's efforts in Zijin Palace weren't wasted." After that was said, a very small gold dragon sitting on a pink cloud came down in front of Hashi. It seems that the little golden dragon had completely healed by now. The golden scales on his body were glistening. Along with his body's originally thumb-sized width got wider. However, the cotton candy-like pink cloud he was riding on, when matched with his tiny body, didn't match the fact that he was the noble and mighty golden dragon. Hashi restrained herself from smiling. "At least your scales resemble a dragon's now, unlike before when someone could have mistaken you as a snake." The little golden dragon suddenly became angry at Hashi, pointing at her and cursing incessantly. Hashi suddenly got rid of her teasing tone. "No matter what, thank you for protecting Dan Dan at Zijin Palace, and thank you for protecting me too." The little golden dragon's scolding stopped and coldly snorted. This still isn't good enough. Hashi didn't mind his arrogant character and changed the subject. "As long as you're good, then it's good. Why did you suddenly bring me back to this room? What of this matter of me bringing you back?" Having heard what was said, the little golden dragon raised its voice. "It's clearly you who triggered the secret territory's restriction, starting the transfer of the secret territory's controlling right." After returning back to her soul, in this case, Hashi didn't actually leave her soul, she just returned from La La Land. 2. Gold and jade in glorious splendor, a dazzling sight. 3. Benzang, literally translates as this senior. Chapter 348 Heaven Defying Luck. The little golden dragon's words alarmed Hashi. The secret territory's controlling right? How could this be? After becoming the descendant of Zijin Palace, the sealed dragon territory was already considered hers. But, the information left by the original master of Zijin Palace did pass on information saying that obtaining the controlling right over the secret territory wasn't an easy task. Even if the secret territory closes, she still may not obtain it. Hashi originally didn't hold much hope. When she was in the 100 Herb Mist, she clearly didn't do much. So how did she still obtain the controlling right to the secret territory? The little golden dragon raised his head, groaning. "Even if I don't want to admit it, but you, woman, still have some abilities. Although you can't be compared to my previous master, but to let me reluctantly admit this to you isn't an impossible thing. Having said this, the little golden dragon pointed at the floor and lowered its voice. If you want to obtain control over sealed dragon domain's secret territory then, first, you must have remarkable talent and willpower. You were already verified when you inherited the Zijin Palace. Second, you need to go through and collect the 5 heavenly spiritual treasures from Greenwood Realm, Water Moon Realm, Burning Heaven Realm, Ice Snow Realm, and Desolate Desert Realm in order to prove that you've mastered the strength of the secret territory. Originally, this is extremely hard to accomplish. However, who could have thought that you saved so many people and by an accident arising from many causes, 1, you managed to get all 5 of the secret territory's heavenly spiritual treasures. However, having just these treasures isn't enough. You have to be able to condense enough spiritual power to touch the secret territory's restriction barrier. In fact, this can only be done by gold core stage and above martial artists. However, due to the fact that, just now, Dan and your Purple Abyss Vine ate so many magical plants, it was just enough to touch the secret territory's restriction barrier. Although the little golden dragon was disoriented at the time, due to his contract with Hushi, he was still able to clearly see everything outside the space. Even he had to sigh, this little girl has a formidable amount of strength and potential. In addition, she also had luck that defied the heavens. Requirements which were supposed to be difficult to accomplish was, unexpectedly, easily attained by her. Thinking up to here, the little golden dragon coldly snorted and flew higher up. Keeping his arrogant character, he coldly said, and of course, the most important point is that you must be able to become the master Benzun has genuinely approved of. That means that I must willingly enter a life and death blood contract with you, which can't be reversed, not the originally dispensable contract we had. By becoming Benzun's genuine master, to obtain my whole heart's willing approval, only then can you become the secret territory's true master. As soon as the little golden dragon said this, it swooped down, and when it neared the side of Hush's neck, it firmly bit down. For a while Hushi didn't see anything, she didn't have enough time to dodge, she only felt the pain in her neck. Soon after, a gold-colored beam enveloped both her and the little golden dragon. Moments later, the golden beam scattered and the wound on Hushi's neck disappeared without a trace. However, the golden mark of a dragon appeared on the hollow of her palm. This golden mark was completely different from the gold lines she received when she and the little golden dragon initially drew their contract. This mark was incomparably clear, it seemed to have gone deep into her flesh. It also held a faint feeling of great power. Although the golden dragon mark quickly disappeared from Hush's palm, she was still able to clearly sense it. It seemed as if there was a strange memory, that didn't belong to her, burned into her mind. Hushi knew that these memories were part of the dragon race's inheritance. But, now, these memories were fuzzy and she was only able to see one sentence clearly, 1, by an accident arising from many causes, a freak combination of facts. However, it's not without harm if someone takes the pills for a long time. No matter how pure and perfect the pill was, each pill contained quantities of an individual medicine. These individual medicines would accumulate and made it easy for martial artists to go overboard when being promoted. According to research done by ancestors of Feng family, this spiritual spring tree was able to dissolve this individual medicine. Therefore, Feng Yunjing was determined to get this tree. Furthermore, this tree was difficult to locate inside the Ice Snow realm. Seeing this scene, Hushi couldn't help but smile. Luckily for her, the time she received the inheritance was very good. Otherwise, Feng Yunjing would be able to take away this spiritual spring tree. Although she didn't value the tree as rare, when she thought about her enemy getting good things, she felt unhappy. To the side, the little golden dragon's mouth twitched. Unfortunately, although this standstill of time is powerful, there are some restrictions. You can't touch the bodies of martial artists. Otherwise, boss, you are the knife that erased that slut. Isn't that just death ending all your troubles? Chapter 350. Slowly settling accounts. Hushi softly smiled. To erase her with a knife, isn't that too cheap of a fate for Feng Lianying? Rest assured, my patience is very good. What we have is time, I'll slowly settle my accounts with her. Seeing that the time left for the people to remain frozen was almost up, Hushi no longer hesitated. She quickly began to manipulate the people inside the secret territory. Although she couldn't directly touch the people inside the secret territory, she could move them around. The storage items that were stored inside the storage rings that the martial artists carried around were hard for her to take. However, the charms they wore on the outside or held in their hands, she kindly took, as if they were being offered to her. Hush's mouth picked up into a sinister smile. Looking around, she quickly made up her mind. After Feng Yunjing and his party left the Greenwood realm, they quickly found the spiritual spring tree by following the secret method that Feng family's elder alchemist provided. But there were 7 rank 5 magical beasts guarding the spiritual spring tree. Each rank 5 magical beast was equivalent to gold core stage cultivation. Feng Yunjing, Feng Lianying, and disciples of the Liu Li sect wasted a lot of labor in order to completely defeat these 7 rank 5 magical beasts. Seeing that the spiritual spring tree was so close, Feng Yunjing's eyes flashed with something. As long as he was able to obtain this tree, the danger of taking so many pills would be eliminated. Then, Feng family would be able to stand at the summit of Miluo continent. From now on, nobody on this earth would be able to fight or obstruct him. Everything he wanted, every person he wanted, he would be able to easily grasp in the palm of his hand. Everybody was filled with excitement. They were so excited that they didn't even bother to clean up the 7 rank 5 magical beasts. They took out a 9th level spiritual shovel and prepared to move the spiritual spring tree. But after a quarter of an hour, something occurred that shocked Feng Yunjing. His hand just touched one of the leaves on the spiritual spring tree before he felt the sky spin and the earth go round. When he opened his eyes, the scenery before his eyes had completely changed. The sounds of the magical beasts' roars sounded in the air, rising and falling one after another. What stood in front of them wasn't 7 rank 5 magical beasts anymore, instead hundreds of thousands of magical spirit beasts surrounded them. These magical beasts contained 3 rank 4 magical beasts, some rank 5 and even one at rank 6. Not only that, but they were no longer located in front of the spiritual spring tree. Instead, they found themselves in a desolate desert. Feng Yunjing's face changed. He was just about to use the weapon he carried to resist the magical beasts. But he was stunned to find that the weapon that was originally in his palm had, at some unknown point, disappeared. As it turns out, Feng Lianying, Nai Jinchen, and the rest of the disciples of Liu Li sect found themselves in a similar situation. Feng Lianying had long since already been scared stupid by the magical beast's roars, and the weapon in her hand had also disappeared. She was so panicked, she found that she didn't have enough time to take out another weapon from her storage ring before a magical beast snarled and pounced towards her. I don't want to die. Feng Lianying shrieked and ruthlessly pulled a disciple of Liu Li sect to stand in front of her. Only a tearing sound was heard as the disciple was horribly torn apart. The Liu Li sect disciple didn't even have time to groan before they became a pool of flesh. Nai Jinchen also found himself caught off guard, and to add on to the fact, he was caught off guard by a rank 5 magical beast. He was terrified. Noticing what Feng Lianying did, he also instinctively pulled 2 Liu Li sect disciples in front of him. Feng Yunjing's cultivation level was higher than those 2, therefore he was able to take out a new weapon and kill in all directions. However, the number of magical beasts in front of them was too high, and the bodies of these few people all contained the scent of the spiritual spring tree, causing the magical beasts became extremely excited. Even Feng Yunjing was unable to make them fearfully withdraw. Chapter 351. Leaving the secret territory. Momentarily, the flesh flew in all directions. The bones rumbled and rolled around on the floor. In the hot and overgrown desert, the air reeked of blood for a short period of time. This caused the people to feel sick and heightened the magical beast's excitement. As time went by, Feng Yunjing's complexion became more and more unsightly. The spiritual power inside his body was beginning to run out. And the people around him, the disciples of Liu Li sect, were slowly dwindling. Some of them were devoured by the magical beasts and others were taken by Feng Lianying and Nai Jinchen to act as a shield. Even Feng Lianying and Nai Jinchen, who took so many of the disciples to use as scapegoats, were also becoming battered and exhausted. Above all were Feng Lianying's clothes, which were originally used to showcase her elegant figure. Although they did have some defensive attributes, how could they possibly be enough to endure against the magical beasts? By now her clothes had already been torn into shreds by the magical beasts, showing faint traces of her underwear. Most of the disciples of Liu Li sect had already been injured or dead, leaving almost none left. Feng Yunjing was stuck in combat with the rank 6 magical beast as the 3 rank 4 magical beasts pounced towards Feng Lianying. These several people's spiritual power was almost used up. Feng Lianying couldn't hold it anymore, she fell apart and shouted. No. No. I don't want to die. Save me Nijin Chen, don't you like me? Quick, save me. Saying this, she grabbed Nijin Chen and pulled him in front of her. Quick, block the attack for me. Nijin Chen's eyes flashed with extreme fear and shock, as he began to randomly swinging the long sword in his hand around. However, one magical beast still managed to bite down on his left hand. The only noise he heard was Ka as piercing bursts of pain stabbed him. Nijin Chen could feel the bones on his left hand breaking apart. Meanwhile, another magical beast's bloody mouth came near his face. The fear of life or death scared Nijin Chen into freezing up. He wanted to call for help, he wanted to escape. But his whole body seemed to be rigid. Aside from desperately waiting for his death, he could do nothing else. He thought about how he granted whatever was asked for from Feng Lianying over these past 10 years, how meek and subservient he was. Then he thought about how ruthlessly she just treated him. At this moment, any love Nijin Chen held for Feng Lianying completely vanished. Except for undeserved desire, the only feelings he had left over were a heart full of hate and towards her. Ideas of trampling her filled his mind. It seemed like, soon, the lives of Feng Lianying and Nijin Chen were about to end, and Feng Yunjing wasn't faring much better either. During this time, 1,000 pounds were hung by a thread. Chapter 352 Jade Body on display. Don't tell me that something suddenly happened inside Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory, so it pushed us outside? Everybody's tongues were wagging, their faces were filled with shock. But nobody was able to figure out what had happened. Suddenly, someone's deep voice sounded out. I feel as if this situation seems to feel as if somebody has gained control over the secret dragon domain. What? How could this be? Legends say this secret territory is the almighty martial artist's. How could it be controlled by someone else? Feng Yunjing's face didn't appear nervous. He slowly took out a spirit pill and swallowed the replenishing spirit pill. But something gloomy and dark flashed by his eyes. Just now, he almost obtained the spiritual spring tree. But now, he failed through lack of a final effort and even lost dozens of Liu Li sect's elite disciples. This time, the loss Feng family suffered could be said to be disastrous. Zijin Palace's inheritance wasn't obtained, in 100 Herb Mist Feng Lianying lost popular feeling, and most importantly, they narrowly missed getting the spiritual spring tree. This time, he truly didn't know what to say when he returned. It was just, how could he always feel as if all these acts were deliberately planned against Feng family? Just like the situation now, where they were thrown out of the secret territory. The martial artists before them also lost the weapons they had been carrying in their hands. And their dozen or so people were thrown into the middle of a crowd of magical beasts. They experienced 9 deaths and were still alive, one, almost not making it out alive. Could it be that someone truly got control over the secret territory? If that's the case, who was able to obtain control over the Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory? Could it be Nangong Yu? No. Impossible. Feng Yunjing's thoughts swept past this idea, immediately denying it. What type of place was Sealed Dragon territory? These martial artists in front of him only knew one and understood half, too. But he, who was the person who held great political power inside Feng family, was clear. This sacred place had existed for a millennium. Every big influential family on Miluo continent had been preparing for Secret Dragon Domain's secret territory to open for several hundred years. In the event that someone was able to get control over Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory, then how powerful was that person? If this type of person truly decided to oppose Feng family, then how could they, Feng family, possibly resist? Just as Feng Yunjing was just thinking about such a person, he heard a cry of surprise. In the blink of an eye, he saw Feng Lianying crawling up from the ground. It's unclear whether it was due to the fact that she was roasted by the hot temperatures inside the barren desert, or if it was due to the situation with the magical beast scratching her. But when she stood up, the clothes on her body, unexpectedly, completely fell apart and turned into a puddle of powder. In a flash, Feng Lianying was no longer wearing any clothes, causing her jade-like body to be put on display. Originally, everyone was busy being angry over their lost weapons and asking why they had been sent out of the secret territory, so nobody paid attention to Feng Lianying. But everyone's gaze turned towards Feng Lianying after her shout just now. Immediately, there were gasps of surprise coming all around. No sooner after one subsides another arises. Most of all the low-level male martial artists looked up and down at Feng Lianying's fruit-like body as their eyes filled with lust and excitement. Someone couldn't help themselves and whispered, "Aya, 3. This couldn't be the Ice Lotus Fairy, right? I didn't expect her to be so passionate and bold, not even wearing clothes in front of all these martial artists." Clicking their tongue, "Look at this soft and tender flesh. Pampered girls raised by influential families really aren't the same. If I can get on intimate terms with this person, I would willingly die." How could Feng Lianying ever imagine that after struggling to escape from that beast, going back would also welcome such humiliation? For a moment, her beautiful face was snow white and her two hands were clenched together, hugging her shivering body. She wanted to take out a new set of clothes from her storage ring but was unable to because her spiritual power was all used up. She wouldn't be able to take anything out for a while. 9 deaths and were still alive. They were only narrowly able to escape. 2 knew one and understood half. Feng Yunjing is saying these people are ignorant. 3 Aya, a term used to express dismay, exasperation, or surprise. Chapter 353 completely ruined immediately, her pair of beautiful eyes filled with tears. It would appear to be as if I saw a white lotus, but the male martial artists all began to feel sorry and take pity on her. But there were also female martial artists who disapproved of her attitude, coldly standing to the side and heatedly mocking her. Truly shameless. Obviously, you're wanton, yet you're still sitting here putting out a pitiful appearance. Exactly, if I was her, I would have been ashamed to even see people. Unexpectedly she puts on a pitiful face trying to get me to feel sorry for her. What Ice Lotus Fairy? All I see is a white lotus flower putting on an act of flirtatious behavior. Feng Lianying just got up before realizing how awful her current situation was. Originally she wanted to put on a weak, couldn't-he-do-harmed expression in order to evoke some sympathy. But now, having heard the comments of these women, her face twisted and the shame in her eyes completely changed to bitter hatred. In the end, who was it who harmed Feng family? Who caused Feng Lianying to make such a fool of herself? The painstaking effort she exerted to build up her image these past few years, her blissful fated marriage. It was all ruined in these short few days, completely ruined. No matter who caused her to be so humiliated today, she wanted to put it all on Shiyu, that slut. She definitely won't let go of that slut. There will be a day when she kills that slut and leaves her without a burial site. Under other people's loathing, wanton, passionate, or criticizing gazes, Feng Lianying's body had almost no clothing to cover herself and felt as if there were brambles and thorns on her back. Unfortunately, she completely wasted her spiritual power. She couldn't even take out one piece of clothing. Her eyes were reddened with tears. Suddenly, a warm piece of clothing was draped over her, covering her body. Feng Lianying turned her head around and saw Nijintian's deeply concerned gaze. "Lianying Maimai, are you okay? Those magical beasts from before didn't hurt you, right?" Feng Lianying stared blankly, recalling her previous actions inside the group of magical beasts, how she pulled Nijintian in front of her to act as her shield and suddenly felt as if she had a bit of a guilty conscience. Nijintian seemed to have not noticed her emotions, softly saying, "If Lianying Maimai doesn't take offense, she can wear my clothing." At first, Feng Lianying was embarrassed. But after raising her head up and seeing Nijintian's tender and infatuated gaze, she stood up, feeling proud and arrogant again. Nijintian was the dog that stuck to her side. No matter how many times she tossed him around or humiliated, he would never betray her. Although she didn't care much for this dog, This dog continually pursued her. This greatly satisfied her vanity. Feng Lianying was too busy feeling proud of herself and didn't notice Nai Jinchen bowing his head down to cover the cold look flitting through his eyes. Just as Feng Lianying put on Nai Jinchen's clothes, Feng Yunjing coldly smiled. Let's go. We'll return to Feng family first before discussing. They must go back as soon as possible and report today's matter to their elders. As for Feng Lianying, that stupid woman who lost face today. Feng Yunjing already concocted a plan to completely abandon this race. Watching as Feng Lianying and Feng Yunjing prepared to leave, the people who were previously too scared to speak out in front of Feng family's great prestige suddenly shouted out. The scene regarding Feng family's eldest daughter, the Ice Lotus Fairy, was quickly spread through word of mouth. Everybody repeated over and over again how Feng Lianying's body was on display after everyone left the secret territory. By the next day, the news was popular gossip alongside news of Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory. In Yangjing City, inside all the great streets and alleys, too, everybody knew this information. 1. Brambles and thorns on her back, she felt uneasy and nervous. 2. Great streets and alleys, everywhere in the city. Chapter 354 Repaying double the amount. Watching as the three figures vanished, the little golden dragon standing by Hashi gloomily said, such a pity. If this time when the secret territory's control is being handed over was longer, then those three people would have been torn apart by the magical beast. Contrary to one might think, Hashi didn't seem to have any big reaction. She was standing to the side, looking over all the treasures she plundered today. Faintly saying, Feng Yunjing is at nascent soul stage. If his life was truly in danger, the magical beasts may not be able to do much damage to him. In fact, he may even do damage to the secret territory instead. You should have also seen the chilliness in Nai Jinchen's eyes. Looks like he won't be protecting his Ice Lotus Fairy with all his heart anymore. To add on to the fact the shame Feng Lianying just lost in front of everyone, it won't be long before everyone knows about what happened here. Inside Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory control room, Hashi could not only control every corner inside the secret territory, she could clearly see about 10 kilometers outside as well. In other words, even if she didn't leave the secret territory, the entire Kang Mountain was under her control as well. Therefore, even though Feng Lianying and the other martial artists were kicked out of the secret territory, Hashi could still clearly see all of their actions. Hashi's mouth lifted up into an unfeeling smile, and in passing she waved her hand, taking the treasured items she just earned into her space. Unhurriedly she said, Feng Lianying, this vicious and merciless White Lotus. First she hurt you and Dan Dan, then she continuously plots against me, trying to kill me. How could she die so easily to those magical beasts? Isn't that too convenient for her? Rest assured Long, 1. This woman hurt you and Dan Dan. There will definitely be a day when she repays you double the amount. After Hush's words, she listened to the little divine dragon getting fired up. He really was worthy of being her family's boss. Although his strength wasn't profound yet, his domineering attitude was really matchless. It was until his last few words that caused Hush's smile to come crashing down. Don't call me Long, it's not imposing enough. I'm the magnificent golden dragon, how can I be called such a wet behind the ears name, too? Hashi chuckled. This is the nickname Dan Dan gave you. If you want to protest, go find Dan Dan, but, I'll warn you. If you cause Dan Dan to cry, my family's Little Purple won't let you get away with it. Little Purple is precisely the purple abyss vine. After this guy and Dan Dan ate all those magical plants, they developed a deep foodie friendship. Adding to the fact was that Dan Dan was especially clever and obedient. Every day, he would call Little Purple Auntie Purple Abyss, causing the Purple Abyss vine to treat Dan Dan even more generously than her, the master. The little divine dragon's face immediately came crashing down. He definitely wasn't scared of Dan Dan. But, when he thought about that adorable little pink pig's weeping appearance, the little divine dragon felt as if all the scales on his body hurt. Especially twitchy, especially unable to endure. Hashi no longer paid any mind to this confused little guy. She tilted her head up, directing her attention to the top of the room. Actually, this secret room was not just a singular room, but the basement of a palace. After gaining control of the secret territory, Hashi found that the ceiling in this room was completely clear. Looking up, she could see what appeared to be the site of a dazzling palace. 1. Long. This is a nickname of sorts for the little divine dragon. Long means dragon. 2. Wet behind the ears, immature and unexperienced. It always felt as if, no matter what formidable task this girl in front of it said, she seemed to always be able to accomplish it. Hashi no longer talked and pitifully looked towards the sealed dragon sword. Because the level of the sealed dragon domain's secret territory was too high, she was unable to access some places, even though she was now in control of the secret territory. For example, the sealed dragon sword inside the palace's main hall. At the very least, she needed to be gold core stage in order to bypass the restriction. Otherwise, if you are able to hold the sword but you hurt all sides, just think about it. But it's just wishful thinking, nothing more. If she was truly able to take out the sealed dragon sword, the little golden dragon was afraid that she would be chased by people everywhere. After finishing dealing with the secret territory's matters and sending the little golden dragon into her space, Hashi went back and appeared in front of Nangongyu. 11. Upon seeing Hashi, Nangongyu firmly carried her. His face was full of anxiousness. Did you get hurt? Sensing Nangongyu's anger and concern, Hashi was distracted. Immediately, she softly said, "Didn't I leave you a slip of paper saying that I was fine?" 1. Killed gods if gods blocked and killed Buddhas if Buddhas blocked, to overcome every obstacle. 2. Overcoming catastrophe to ascend heavenwards. After overcoming some calamity, one will become a god. Chapter 356. Are you willing to marry me? After Nangongyu held on to her for a moment, he slowly loosened his grip on her. Pinching her nose and faking anger, he said, "You still dare to talk? You left only a slip of paper with no trace of you around. How was I supposed to know if you were coerced into doing that? Do you still say that I shouldn't have worried?" Hashi lowly coughed twice. She was rarely embarrassed. But at that time she wanted to let Feng Lianying and Feng Yunjing experience some unluckiness. Momentarily, she was up to her ears in work. 1. So, she only had time to hurriedly leave a slip of paper for Nangongyu and the rest of them. At the time, she didn't think too much of it. Wu Yu and Jiu Liu Feng weren't as anxious as Nangongyu, but when they saw that Hashi returned safe and sound, they were also quite happy. But thinking about how those several people inexplicably ended up outside the secret territory, Wu Yu couldn't help but ask, "It's very strange. With sealed dragon domain's secret territory being so big, unless someone touched the control core, how could everyone has been sent out? Don't tell me that the secret territory encountered some sort of problem? Unless someone obtained the sealed dragon sword? As everyone knows, sealed dragon domain was used to hold the sealed dragon sword. If someone was able to get the sword, then secret territory's core control would certainly open." Hashi rubbed her nose and didn't dare to say any more. The little golden dragon had said that before she could hold the sealed dragon sword, she must not let anyone know she was the owner of the secret territory. This included even the people closest to her. Otherwise, if someone killed her, the secret territory would collapse and the little golden dragon would experience a violent death. Nangongyu looked at the deep burning in Hashi's eyes. He seemed to have finally guessed what was going on. But instead of saying anything, he rubbed the top of Hashi's head, softly saying, "Elevena, do you want to come back to Hell King Manor with me?" Hashi gloomily shook her head. "Why do you want me to follow you back to Hell King Manor? I still have to settle some matters inside Kang Mountain. Once I finish dealing with them, I'll return to my own courtyard." Unexpectedly, Nangongyu didn't continue to insist. Nodding his head, something gloomy flashed in his eyes. "You returning to your own courtyard is good too. I'll let Wu Xin follow you, to protect you." Just as Hashi was about to retort, Nangongyu extended his hand out to softly caress her warm cheek. Saying with a gentle and low voice, "During this time, I won't be able to come find you. You have to obediently take good care of yourself and wait for me to come back, too?" Hashi unhappily slapped his hand away. Unexpectedly, when she slapped his hand, her hand landed on top of his. Unlike previous times, Nangongyu extended his other hand and brought her into his embrace. His deep voice, which faintly seemed to hold weakness and praying, sounded in her ears. "Elevena, in the event that everything is over, are you willing to marry me?" Hashi was stunned. It seemed as if something was stuck in her throat, leaving her speechless. Hashi vaguely knew that Nangongyu needed to attend to a very important and dangerous matter. So the words he spoke just now seemed to sound like his last dying words. Hashi deliberately wanted to question what he was going to do. But seeing Nangongyu's eyes filled with stars and burning, Hashi swallowed any words she wanted to say. Hashi rolled around a small storage ring on her palm. Her complexion was indifferent and the words she spoke held even less emotions. "I'm replying no to your question. After all, when you go there, only God knows if you'll ever reappear in front of my face again." It wasn't even a moment later when she threw the storage ring onto Nangongyu's body, indifferently saying, "Everything inside here is for you. I believe that these things will be helpful for you, no matter what you're doing." 1. Up to her ears in work, she was so busy, everything basically slipped out of her mind or she was too busy to do anything else. 2. Same use as okay. Chapter 357. Wait for me to come back. Nangongyu was startled. He looked around inside the storage ring. His eyes quickly showed astonishment. The ring was filled full of magic weapons and spirit fruits that were hard to estimate the worth of. By taking just a bite out of those spirit fruits, one would completely replenish their spirit energy. Additionally, there were also sacred grade fighting pills called Lotus Mark Immortality Peach. In Miluo continent, one of these pills could be estimated to be worth a small city. But Hashi gave him 20 of them, so much so that inside the pile of magic weapons, there was a flying purple sword. Nangongyu's expression was extremely moved. The flying sword appeared in his hand. It quickly released the sound of an imperial chant. "This is..." Hashi pursued her lips. "This isn't the real sealed dragon sword, it's a fake the real owner made. But its power is 50% of the original sword. I can't use it at my current strength, so it's better to give it to you." This fake sealed dragon sword was originally inside the desolate desert realm. It was there that Hashi noticed its power was formidable. No magical creature dared to enter within 10 li, 1, of it. So, she took it out. It was only after she took out the fake that she gloomily discovered she couldn't use it. Forget about it, she can't use the real sealed dragon sword. But now, she can't even use the fake one. She can only stare at it, too depressing. Looks like the most important thing to do now is increase her strength. Nangongyu dazedly stared at the long sword in his hand. Nangongyu's eyes glittered with tears. Hashi looked at Nangongyu, who seemed to have turned stupid. She thought he couldn't look up to this sealed dragon sword and wanted to say something. But before she could, Nangongyu suddenly extended his hand out and brought her into his embrace. Hugging her closely, he seemed to want to embed her into his flesh and blood. "In my life, I've always been fighting alone from the beginning. When I grew up, I blocked wind and covered rain for others. You are the person I wish to protect the most in this life. But you're also the first one that I can't shield under my wing. Elevena, wait for me to come back. You can't become fond of other men, you can't look at other men, and you can't let yourself be hurt." During the first half of Nangongyu's words, Hashi smiled and felt moved. But after hearing his last sentence, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. Pushing him away, she said, "Are you finished with your this can't do and that can't do?" This time, Nangongyu didn't continue speaking. He deeply stared at Hashi, seemingly trying to engrave her image into his mind. Then he quickly turned and left. Qinglong and Wu Yu quickly followed Nangongyu, walking along beside him. They saw him tightly biting his jaw and push his heart down. Master didn't tell Wang Fei the matter they were dealing with this time was to deal with the Feng family at a date earlier than what was originally planned. And Feng family not only had the support of Liu Li sect and the foundation of a millennium, they also had Feng family's scary influence. It could be said that in terms of going against Feng family this time, Hell King Manor didn't have much odds of success. But Master couldn't wait to abolish Feng family, he couldn't wait to get rid of Feng Yunjing and Feng Lianying, those two people who wished to bring harm to Wang Fei. Even more so, he couldn't wait to impressively marry Wang Fei through the door. Watching Nangong Yu and the others leaving, Hashi's heart gave birth to indescribable sorrow. But she quickly threw this sorrow to the back of her mind. Turning around, she walked towards Jiyu Liufeng, Zhu Yangan, and Jiyu Yidao. Jiyu Liufeng was distracted. He couldn't help but keep thinking of the intimate moment Hashi and Nangong Yu just shared. Hashi had a delicate face, long eyelashes that slightly trembled, bright eyes, and white teeth. So much so that compared to Nailan Yangming, the women in the drawing, to some degree, she was more elegant. Chapter 358. Returning home. The more Jiyu Liufeng imagined Hashi as a woman, the more his heart swayed and the face behind his mask was flushed. But quickly, he came back and saw Hashi's concentrated expression as she used a needle on Jiyu Yidao. The gentleness in his heart scattered and made way for appreciation and respect. Shiyu was clearly a male. Furthermore, he was a highly skilled genius doctor and he was his close friend. How could he, Jiyu Liufeng, think of him, Hashi Shiyu, with such thoughts? Jiyu Liufeng suddenly felt ashamed. Lowering his head, he didn't dare to look at Hashi face to face. Zhu Yangan thought this his family's master was too embarrassed to ask Hashi, but at this moment, he couldn't deal with that. Walking 2 steps forward, he asked, Shigongzi, that day, when we were inside Zijin Palace Hall, you asked why we would risk our lives to save you. Hashi nodded her head. You want to ask me to save Jiyu Liufeng's mother? Precisely. Hearing what was said, Zhu Yangan felt overjoyed at the good news. At once, he asked, my family's master's mother has been bedridden for many years. No matter how many genius doctors we invited, it was no help. We're asking genius Dr. Shi to help now. If you want me to save people, that's fine. Hashi nodded her head without hesitation. But I'm also not some god, I can't possibly cure every single sickness. Additionally, I have some matters to settle these few days. Wait a bit, I'll go to Shengde Hall to look for you. At that time, you can go bring me to look at the patient. At first, Zhu Yangan's face seemed to be staring blankly. Following that, his eyes turned red. Pu Tong sounded as he kneeled down on the floor. I'll bring my family's master to thank genius Dr. Shi, who granted us such a huge favor. Jiyu Liufeng cleared his hand and came over. He pulled the person up from the floor. Facing Hashi, he faintly smiled. Shiyu, I'll wait for you. Saying this, he didn't bother to linger anymore and without the slightest hesitation, he turned around and walked away. But nobody discovered the romantic love affair in his naturally charming pair of eyes. Now, a dedication and decisiveness settled in his eyes. Although Shiyu denied him, Jiyu Liufeng decided that if Shiyu was truly able to save his mom, then his life would be Shiyu's. For Shiyu, he wouldn't hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. After sending Nangong Yu and Jiyu Liufeng, Hashi returned to the secret territory and activated the concealing array. When Sealed Dragon Domain's concealing array was active, even nascent soul stage martial artists wouldn't be able to discover the secret territory's location. Forget about trying to enter it. From now on, Kang Mountain and Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory was now Hush's private property. She could open up a few locations inside the secret territory to use as a training ground for her family's people. If there was any danger, she could allow Wet Nurse Chen and the others to enter the secret territory. It really could be said that this was the perfect place to hide and to attack. After finishing with her matters regarding the secret territory, Hashi no longer hesitated. She quickly flew towards B Courtyard. At this moment, her heart gave birth to a sudden feeling of guilt. In front of her eyes, she could practically see Xiao Li's lovable and silly smile, Wet Nurse Chen's deeply concerned complexion, and her family's people's adoring and trust-filled eyes. In her previous life, she was just a person. Regardless of how long she left for and no matter where she lived, she always returned to an empty house. She has never been able to call a place home. But in this life, it's different. Inside B Courtyard, there's always people waiting for her, looking forward to her. There will always be a room that's lit up for her, providing her warmth. This is home. With this time's gains, she had confidence that wet Nurse Chen and everyone else could become stronger. It would also be able to provide for good days ahead for them. Chapter 359 Bloody Slaughterhouse. Hushi descended onto a lawn nearby Bee Courtyard. Just as she was about to go near it, her complexion suddenly changed. Originally, Bee Courtyard was hidden by an array. But now, it completely disappeared. The wind blew the pungent smell of blood from inside the courtyard. Hushi's heart sunk a little bit. In an instant, her figure appeared inside the courtyard. Not even a moment later, an even heavier smell of blood assaulted one's noses. The blood on the floor seemed to resemble a red lotus blooming, suddenly causing Hushi's eyes to redden. Hushi stumbled, she was almost unable to keep standing. Just now, she had pictured this warm, peaceful and harmonious scene. But now, it had transformed into a twisted and sinister scene with corpses and a bloody slaughterhouse. The inside of Bee Courtyard was in disorder, it was full of corpses. Inside the manor lay a servant girl, Xiao Sai, and the low-level martial artists she had been given control over from Naylan family. Every one of them died with eyes filled with fright, their eyes were wide open. They were dead but wouldn't close their eyes, too. And in the center of Bee Courtyard, wet Nurse Chen's body had been carelessly thrown onto the ice-cold floor. Just like the others, her eyes were wide open. There was a gaping hole in her chest and her internal organs were on the ground, smashed by someone's foot. Wet Nurse Chen's eyes had unwillingness and tears of blood, flowing out. As if she had been shouting to be able to see her family's young lady when she was at death's doorstep. However, her breath had long since been cut off and any sign of life had disappeared. Even if Hushi had better medical skills, it's impossible to revive a dead person. Hushi slowly walked up to wet Nurse Chen. Crouching down next to her, she closed the eyes that were filled with remaining grievances. Softly saying, "Wet nurse, Hushi has come back. Forgive me, Hushi came back late." A flicker of light passed through her eyes, but it quickly changed into coldness that resembled the azura from hell and killing intent. Her lowered voice was clear and pleasant to listen to, but it also carried a coldness that had people's hairs standing on end. "Wet nurse, you can rest assured. I'll definitely make the people who did harm to you repay you 100,000 times. Wet nurse, when you've arrived on the Yellow Springs, road, you must walk slowly so you may see their headless bodies, their expressions seeing they're at the end, oh." After she finished speaking these few words, little by little, she gently took wet Nurse Chen's internal organs and reinserted them into her stomach. Then, she took out a silver sewing needle. Her hands were quick and moved as if they were in a dance, sewing back the cut-open stomach as if it hadn't been damaged before. The elegant youth's expression was distinctly cold and the corner of her mouth even held a sneer. She sat on the floor, in between the blood, bodies, and wreckage. Her 2 hands were covered in blood. But her finger, which was well proportioned and seemed to be carved from jade, held a needle and seemed to be dancing as if it was a fantasy. She resembled a demon who had walked out of hell. So beautiful, so brilliant, but also so frightening, allowing people's hairs to stand on end. Wu Xin, who had received an order from his master, hurried over to Bee Courtyard at this time and saw this precise scene in front of his eyes. Even Wu Xin, whose heart was cold and had seen the whole world, held his breath from intimidation. Previously, Wu Xin wasn't fond of Hushi. Although Hushi saved Master's life, it was also because Hushi got hurt that Master got caught up in that crisis. So much so that Master, in order to save her, wasted the blood essence. And most importantly, previously Master had always been cold and formidable, he never had a weakness before. But when Hushi appeared, Master suddenly had the ordinary person's 4 human emotions, 5, and a weakness. And this woman named Naylan Hushi is delicate, in such a way that it's inconvenient, causing Master to have to constantly worry over and protect her. 1. Resemble a red lotus blooming. I believe this means that the blood was spreading. 2. Dead but wouldn't close their eyes. They died with grievances. 3. Tears of blood, a symbol of extreme suffering. 4. Yellow Springs, the underworld in Chinese mythology. 5. 4 human emotions, happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy. Chapter 360 Tearing into pieces. If this continued on, one day, this weakness will become Master's fatal crisis. Therefore, Wu Xin had been scheming to secretly get rid of Hushi, this hindrance of a woman. He made sure to take pains to ensure Master wouldn't suspect anything. Wu Xin had recently just broken through nascent soul stage, and although his foundation still wasn't completely stable, but in Miluo continent, there were few people who had seen him and didn't tremble in fear. This allowed him to injure people as he wished. Yet she was merely an insignificant girl at just foundation establishment stage who, unexpectedly, caused him to feel afraid. Is this woman truly ordinary and weak? After Wu Xin entered B courtyard, this was his first thought. Soon after, he took note of the misery-filled courtyard and the bloody slaughterhouse-like scene. His complexion couldn't help but drop. Initially, before he had entered Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory, Nangong Yu had told Bai Hu and him to guard B courtyard surroundings and to protect Nalan Hashi. However, later when Hashi, by an accident arising from many causes, also entered the Sealed Dragon Domain's secret territory, they lost future Wang Fei's B courtyard. So naturally, if they had to say it, protecting it no longer held value. To add on to the fact, they received information regarding that secret. So, they quickly threw B courtyard and the people inside B courtyard to the back of their minds. In any event, Wu Xin never thought that this moment of ignorance would cause Hushi's servants and subordinates to be massacred. Inside Yangjing City, it's possible to be able to find Hushi's address. There were few people who didn't know that she was Hell King Mana's people and under their protection. Just who ate a bear's heart and the leopard's guts? Unexpectedly, someone dared to put their hand to Hell King Mana's future Wang Fei. At this moment, Hashi had already finished sewing together Wet Nurse Chen's body. Wu Xin walked a few steps forward. Wang Fei, this subordinate has come under Master's order to protect you. Hashi paid no attention to him. She respectfully shifted Wet Nurse Chen's body to a corner and lightly flattened out a corner of her jacket. Softly saying, "Wet Nurse, wait here for a moment for me." After saying that, she no longer hesitated and stood up. Her figure disappeared from the place she originally stood at and began to carefully check every inch and corner inside B courtyard. She had yet to see Shi Jiao and everyone else or Xiao Li. Just after she passed through the corridor and into the back garden, Hush's eyes suddenly contracted. She only saw the back garden's floors were also filled with blood and corpses were strewn about, in disorder. But these corpses, in comparison to the ones in the front yard, met an even crueler and miserable end. Chapter 361 Putting together corpses. But seeing the scene in front of his eyes, he became stupefied. Unexpectedly, Hashi was sticking needles into the corpse. And furthermore, she was also bringing the chopped-off hands and feet over. Once again, through flying needle and running seam, she sewed together the forelimbs again. Wu Xin admitted that this girl's appearance when she was concentrating on stitching was so pure and holy, so awe-inspiring. As if she was set high up, too, and was a god who was able to decide whether or not someone lives or dies. After she sewed Shi Jiao's forelimbs back on his body, except for a light scar, you surprisingly couldn't see that the forelimbs had previously been chopped off. But this couldn't be changed. Nalan Hashi already experienced too much stimulant ion and she was already close to collapsing. If not, how could any regular person be able to treat the dead bodies and even take the chopped off hands and feet? To be able to cautiously and solemnly sew them back on. The most frightening fact was that after Hashi finished sewing Shi Jiao, she didn't stop there. She took the other 9 corpses and moved them to a clean corner. Afterward, one by one she began to use acupuncture and then she began to treat their 1,000 sore and 100 hole, 3, bodies. After she finished sewing together the holes in the 9th body, Wu Xin finally couldn't help but walk a few steps forward. He quietly said, "Wang Fei, these people are already dead. You. Please restrain your grief and accept fate." The movement of the needle in Hashi's hand didn't stop, but her long eyelashes lifted up and looked towards Wu Xin's confused face. The haughty expression his eyes looked at her, clearly looking at her as if she was someone with a mental disorder. Hashi didn't pay any mind to him. After quickly treating the injuries on all the bodies, She took out a Zijin medicine cauldron from her space. When the Zijin medicine cauldron just appeared, it was just the size of a fist. But by the time it touched the ground, it quickly became bigger and bigger. In the blink of an eye, it became a huge stove that could accommodate dozens of people. Hashi took diluted spiritual spring water and generously poured it into the stove. It wasn't until it was more than half full that she stopped pouring it in. She took a glance at the dumbstruck Wi Shin and slowly said, "If you have free time when you stand to the side, then use spiritual fire to add heat to the stove." Wu Shin stared blankly. Soon after, he felt some anger from shame. He was a grand nascent soul stage martial artist. But now this woman, to one's surprise, seemed to be ordering him about like she would to a little boy servant. Besides, these peoples have long since stopped breathing. Their whole body didn't show any signs of spiritual energy and life. This woman, repeatedly doing this, Hashi treating the corpses one by one, what is her end goal? Chapter 362 Alive. See, the little girl's figure was much shorter, smaller, and more delicate when compared to his. At this moment, she was holding a dagger. Raising her head to look at him, her eyes were filled with expressions of cruelty, coldness, and determination. As if he was the moles, crickets, and ants, one, being slaughtered according to her wishes. His ears transmitted a pleasant, sweet-sounding voice that also held the coldness that a demon from hell possessed. "I don't care who you are, my mood is extremely unwell right now. So it's best if you don't irritate me. Furthermore, don't mention the character dead again. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what actions I may take." Finished speaking, she slowly withdrew her dagger. Taking a step back, she unhurriedly said, "Either add heat or get lost and don't let me see you." By the time Wu Xin recovered his expression, he already gave up a big strand of his spiritual fire. That Zijin medicine cauldron had already been warmed up until it was scathing. Wu Xin was suddenly annoyed. He had always been the most level-headed and he was able to control his emotions the best. But, unexpectedly, at this moment he had an urge to find things to ruthlessly to smash. He was a grand nascent soul stage martial artist. Surprisingly, he was threatened by a weak little girl. Furthermore, he was so intimidated by the threat that he became absent-minded and he obediently heated the water for her. To have Wu Xin, a nascent soul stage martial artist, boil water, if this matter was spread out, the entire cultivation world would laugh at him for a whole year. Hashi no longer bothered to ensure that Wu Xin continued to heat up the Zijin medicine cauldron. At this moment, she was so busy her feet didn't touch the ground. She continuously took out spiritual pills from her space, throwing them into the cauldron afterward. It was only until the originally clear and sweet-smelling spiritual spring water changed into an ashy black that caused people to feel fear. Hashi then proceeded to take Shijio along with everyone else and one by one, she threw them into the cauldron. Under the heat of Wu Xin's spiritual flame, the medicinal juice inside the medicine cauldron slowly came to a boil. The medicinal juice seemed to act as if it had its own life, slowly climbing onto Shijio and everyone else's bodies. The foam wiggled and rolled around, seeping into the recently sewn together wounds. This scene caused Wu Xin's hairs to stand on end. He nearly began to question whether or not this woman learned witchcraft. But suddenly, someone let out a faint moan from inside the medicine cauldron. A man leaning on the side of the cauldron slowly opened his eyes. Wu Xin's eyes were wide open, he simply didn't dare to believe what he was seeing. Alive! Alive! Chapter 363 Who is it? They were able to feel an ache in their body and their hearts beating in their chest. Seeing that they were still alive, many people couldn't help but begin crying. When Shijio saw Hashi, he felt ashamed of himself. Such a large man cried until his eyes turned red. "Miss, forgive us. It's us that's useless, we were unable to protect Wet Nurse Chen and Xiao Li well enough." Thinking about how Wet Nurse Chen was unable to be revived, sorrow flashed through Hush's eyes. Her ears seemed to still hear wet Nurse Chen's deeply concerned and nagging voice. But she has already forever lost this warmth. Taking a deep breath, Hashi masked the sadness on her face and softly said, "You've already done very well. As far as I'm concerned, as long as you're able to live on, then you've already done very well." After Hashi said these words, the remaining large guys that were holding back tears couldn't help but cover their faces and began to boo-hoo, and cry. It was Miss that gave them a completely new life, allowed them to cultivate, and allowed them to experience a much easier and cozier life when compared to normal martial artists. Miss gave them so much, but they had never done anything for Miss. Now, they couldn't even properly protect the tiny bee courtyard. Wet Nurse Chen and Xiao Li wastes like them deserved to die. But, not only did Miss not scold them, she also tried her hardest to bring them back from death's abyss and said that all they needed to do was continue staying alive. This great favor, this type of trust, a torn body and crushed bones, too, wouldn't be enough to repay it. Even repaying generation after generation wouldn't be enough. Seeing this group of large, tough men crying like this, Hashi couldn't help but let out a sigh. "All right, stop crying first. Tell me, who was reckless enough to attack this place? And where is Xiao Li?" At once, Shi Jiao said, "We also don't know who attacked this place. But they kept telling us to hand over Shi Yu, godly Dr. Shi. All along, Xiao Li Gunyang, 3, was protecting Wet Nurse Chen. We wanted to let Wet Nurse Chen and Xiao Li leave first, but our strength was not equal to theirs." Shi Jiao hadn't finished speaking before Zhong San's weak voice sounded out. "Miss, I heard that Xiao Li was taken away. They also said they wanted to leave a brief note in the central room, telling you to bring some extinct skill to bring the person back." Shi Jiao and everyone else's injuries were extremely serious. Against all common sense they were able to continue living on because Hashi had previously given a body-strengthening pill for them to eat. So, by the time Hashi came to treat them, she was able to retain their lives. Everyone else in B Courtyard died, only Zhong San was able to preserve his life. Zhong San, this fellow, had always been very astute. After receiving an attack, he took some corpses to cover his body with and pretended to be dead. Only by doing so was he able to avoid a fatal hit. Not only that, he was also able to overhear the group of people's conversation. Zhong San paused, his pale face coughed a few times before continuing. "Miss, no matter what, you must not go to that place. I heard them say that they already set up a trap. They're just waiting for you to go walk right into it. Furthermore, and inside that group of people, there were some individuals I felt were familiar. Just now I recalled who they were." Hashi lowered her voice. "Who is it?" She was very curious as to who was sick of living. Who was it that wanted to go take a walk inside Yama's 4 Palace Hall? Zhong San coughed twice again. The hesitation in his eyes changed into affirmation. "It was Ji Sheng Hall's people. That's right, it was Ji Sheng Hall's people. Especially that young man. I recognized him, his Ji Sheng Hall's shopkeeper Qin's nephew." Chapter 364 My Own Hatred. Naturally I have to take revenge for myself. Ji Sheng Hall. Very good. Ji Sheng Hall. Hush's body released an ice-cold loftiness. The gloom in her eyes extinguished, just like a ghost. "You guys recuperate well. Without my order you can't leave this medicine cauldron." After she finished speaking, she turned around and quickly walked away. Sure enough, on a table inside the central room there was a piece of paper. On the paper there were arrogant words written on it. "Shi Yu, if you wish to save little Gunyang, then before Zisha, 1 time today you must go alone to the eastern outskirts of Yangjing City. Once you reach there, head to the residence that's 3 li to the north. If you pass the time or you notified Hell King to bring people, then you'll see us peel some skin off of little Gunyang. Remember, don't test my patience and come on time." When Hashi received the paper, the weak piece of paper turned into ash in her hands, dispersing onto the ground. Outside, the color of the sky was slowly turning darker and the sun had already completely disappeared from the horizon without a trace. Hashi didn't hesitate any longer. Turning around she began to walk towards the outside of the room. But she only moved 2 steps before she saw Wu Xin in front of her and blocking her. Wang Fei, requesting for subordinate to be able to follow you. Wasn't it just a few bouncing clowns, too? Regardless of whether it was Ji Sheng Hall or someone else, if he wanted to kill someone, wasn't it as easy as a hand's turn? 3. Hashi indifferently shook her head. No need. You stay here and guard, don't let Shi Jiao and the others receive any harm. Because the piece of paper mentioned Hell King Manor, it meant that these people would likely be concerned dogs and jump over the wall, 4. Harming Xiao Li. In order to ensure Xiao Li's safety, even if it's 1 in 10,000, she couldn't take the risk. Wu Xin wrinkled his brows. This subordinate's responsibility is to protect Wang Fei. Let alone with the fact that these people's strengths can't be small if they dare to provoke Wang Fei. For Wang Fei to go into the tiger's den alone, if any mishap happens, then what does this subordinate explain to Wang Ye? Hashi sneered and slowly said, the people they injured are my people. This is my, Nalan Hush's, hatred. Since it's my hatred, I naturally have to take revenge myself. Moreover, the revenge has to be slow. I'll let these people clearly understand what type of people they shouldn't provoke. They will pay a terrible price. Hashi looked at Wu Xin and suddenly softened her voice. Just then, thank you for helping me add fire. Now, I ask you to guard this bee courtyard. After all, this is a warrior at nascent soul stage. Others would agree to light their own fires and protect themselves. No matter whose order it is, this sort of emotion must be obeyed. In a daze, Wu Xin stood where he originally was. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. Just then, Wang Fei was thanking him, asking him. Clearly, he was just a low-level martial artist. But hearing her say words of appreciation, Wu Xin had a type of indescribable feeling of being overwhelmed by a superior. 5. Originally, he decided on a plan to not let Wang Fei take any risks. Under these cold, as ice and frost yet bright, resembling star eyes, for a moment he was unable to say no. Wu Xin let out a low sigh, covering up the embarrassment and strange appearance in his eyes. After muttering to himself for a moment, finally, he took out a jade slip from his storage ring and handed it over to Hashi, asking Wang Fei to carry this jade slip on her. In the time of a crisis, Wang Fei only needs to pinch it into pieces and it can block all nascent soul stage martial artists' full strength blow. And once this jade slip has been broken down into pieces, this subordinate will immediately get notified. The first thing this subordinate will do is rush to Wang Fei's side. Hashi was faintly startled. Soon after, she reached her hand out and took the jade slip, sincerely saying, "Thank you." Finish saying this, she no longer hesitated. Dodging around Wu Xin, she quickly left B courtyard, leaving on her flying sword. 1. Zisha. Time between 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. 2. Bouncing clowns. There, Ji Sheng Hall, fools, he, Wu Xin, doesn't take the threat seriously at all. 3. As easy as a hand's turn, something that doesn't require much effort. 4. Be concerned dogs and jump over the wall. To be driven to a desperate action. 5. Feeling of being overwhelmed by a superior, he feels humbled. Chapter 365. No one has run away, right? The last lights on the horizon faded away. Today the sky lacked the moon and stars. Miluo continent was entirely enveloped in darkness. At this moment, both sides of every street within Yangjing City were already lit up by lanterns. The entire street was shrouded in a dim yellow light. On the East Street, people were already extremely scarce because the weather was very gloomy and lots of shops had already started to close by evening. And Ji Sheng Hall was no exception. Qin Hai was currently sitting cross-legged in the Great Master's chair and commanding a little manservant. "Let your hands and feet close the door quickly, do you hear me? If you keep dawdling I'll let you join your ancestors." 1. How could I, this daddy, invite such a useless person to the shop, simply as just losing face for our Ji Sheng Hall? The little manservant answered yes and grabbed the plank, about to close the door. But just as the door was about to close, a portion of immense power unexpectedly came out from the plank. The little manservant stumbled back 2 steps as a gate pillar fell to the ground and broke, letting out a sorrowful howl. Qin Hai got frightened by this unforeseen event and went into a daze. By the time he came back, a slender figure had come out of the darkness and appeared inside the dusky, candlelit store. This youth was approximately 16 or 17, wearing clothes that were white and what the average martial artist would wear. Hair was held high up by a simple hairpin, exposing a bit of a beautiful and peerless appearance. This was clearly the appearance of someone who could had such an elegant face it could cause cities to collapse, but the youth's two phoenix eyes seemed to contain a coldness to them. All of a sudden, Qin Hai bounced off the master chair. Pointing at the youth, he blurted out, "Young fellow, what are you doing? Can't you see that we're prepared to close the shop? No matter what matters you have, come back tomorrow." His eyes looked towards the spinning young manservant on the ground, that was still holding the plank. Then his eyes dropped and slipped away. He held out his hands towards Hushi and said, "But, just then you wounded my family's little manservant. Now, you have to pay 100 yuan crystals worth of medical expenses, otherwise, don't wonder why I'm rude." The look of the youth still remained frosty, but her mouth changed into a sneer. "Ji Sheng Hall's people are all inside, not one has run away, right?" At first, Qin Hai was distracted, then he abruptly became angry. "Smelly young fellow, you no longer want to live anymore, right? Didn't you hear my words? You still haven't taken out 100 yuan crystals worth of medical expenses? What, don't want to give money and still wish to cause trouble? Don't look at what type of place this is." Finished speaking, he used the hand holding a cattail leaf fan and went to grab the youth. But his hand didn't even touch the youth's clothes when, all of a sudden, he felt piercing and sharp pain on the palm of his hand. Once again, Qin Hai became distracted for several seconds before he reacted. Afterward he looked on helplessly as wisps of blood came out of his wrist. Soon after, his two palms popped and fell onto the floor. Actually, two palms were simultaneously cut off. Qin Hai's eyes were filled with alarm. His mouth was open wide, producing this mournful howl. But, before his voice could spread widely throughout the quiet street, a purple vine wound around his neck, ruthlessly tightening around it and didn't allow him to make another word. And the young manservant holding onto the plank had long been scared foolish, his whole body was trembling and his teeth shook, making gidge sounds. After a quarter of an hour, the purple vine disappeared and the little manservant quickly closed his eyes and fainted on the ground. This youth was evidently the person Ji Sheng Hell carried a vendetta against Hashi. She made the young manservant lose consciousness and grabbed the plank, sealing the shop closed. Chapter 366 Caged Bird Warning. There's some cursing in this chapter, I've censored it but here's a warning anyway. Soon after, from within her body, the purple vine twisted around and came out. It rapidly grew, quickly following along cracks in the door and the wall, growing all over Ji Sheng Hall's courtyard. Under the cover of the night, nobody saw that the both inside and outside of Ji Sheng Hall's walls were densely covered in purple vines. Additionally, this purple vine separated the two worlds through an enchanted barrier, allowing all the people inside Ji Sheng Hall to become caged birds. Nobody would escape and nobody could let out any sounds. A moonless and windy night was the best time for interrogation and murder. Hashi retook the purple abyss vine wrapping around Qin Hai. Qin Hai let out several violent coughs. Immediately he wretchedly howled like a pig being slaughtered. Because the purple abyss vine put down an enchantment, people outside couldn't hear any more sounds from inside Ji Sheng Hall. But, naturally, the people inside Ji Sheng Hall's courtyard could hear everything. So when shopkeeper Qin Fu heard the screams, he couldn't even be bothered to properly finish putting on his clothes before running out. As he was running, he also screamed, "That son of a bee is tired of living, daring to come to Ji Sheng Hall to cause trouble. Do they know whose territory this is?" Qin Hai, who was originally wailing like ghosts and crying like wolves, immediately frantically threw himself over to shopkeeper Qin when he saw him approaching. Lifting up the arm that had been cut off at the wrist, he bawled, "Daddy, save me! You have to act as my master. My hand. My hand." It was all that smelly youngster. He, in one swipe, chopped off my hand. Woo woo woo. Daddy, you have to take revenge for me. Ah. When shopkeeper Qin saw Qin Hai's chopped off wrists, he could only see the white bone inside the fierce-looking flesh. His two eyes blurred and his body staggered. Immediately, he was suddenly angry. Who? In the end, who was it that dared to hurt my son? I will dismember their body 10,000 times. Qin Hai was actually his only son. Although his spiritual base is heterogeneous and his innate cultivation skill wasn't good, but he certainly had a gift for studying medicine. At an earlier time, when Dr. Xie was in a good mood, he, Dr. Xie, promised to properly educate his shopkeeper Qin son. Originally, shopkeeper Qin didn't set his heart on this son. But Dr. Xie's words helped fill his shopkeeper Qin heart with hope. As long as he, Qin Hai, could gain Dr. Xie's inheritance, Qin Hai could become a doctor with a rank. How would their Qin family fear lacking an opportunity to achieve meteoric success in their life then? In the blink of an eye, when shopkeeper Qin was thinking about his beautiful dream, his son's two hands had been cut off at the base. What was the use of a low-level martial artist whose hands had been cut off? Could they study medicine? Could they practice magic? Absolutely not. His sole son was now a waste. Thinking up to here, shopkeeper Qin was seething with anger and Qin Hai was filled with more pain and more hate. Pointing towards the direction Hershey stood in, he bawled, "Daddy, it's him. It was him who suddenly barged into the store. All I did was ask too many questions, so he chopped off my hand. Woo woo woo. Daddy, you must take revenge for me. Let this son of a BS4 limbs get completely chopped off by me. Ah." Shopkeeper Qin turned to face Hershey, who was sitting on the great master's chair. But when he looked at her, he got scared and jumped. He merely saw the faint yellow candle flame reflecting upon an exquisite, snow-white face that resembled porcelain. At a glance, it could be seen that this was merely a weak, untouched youth. Even more so, it was a handsome youth that had refined and beautiful facial features. But this youth's two eyes were deep, filled with icy coldness. Merely just looking at you with those eyes would cause someone to feel as if they were in the 18th level of hell or within some snow, unconsciously causing someone to shiver from head to foot. Chapter 367. It was you guys who dared. Additionally, there was also the imposing manner that emitted out of him. Clearly it was a weak body, looking at people from far away. But it was as if he could crush ants without any extra trouble, causing shopkeeper Qin felt an unspeakable feeling of fear. He stumbled backwards a step and his voice trembled. "You. Who are you? What do you want to do here?" But just after speaking this, he suddenly discovered that this imposing and astonishing youth was merely at foundation establishment stage. At first, shopkeeper Qin was shocked. He found it hard to believe. Soon after, he felt ashamed, which turned into anger. He was scared by a youth at foundation establishment stage. Although shopkeeper Qin himself was also just at foundation establishment stage, Jisheng Hall had numerous bodyguards. Among these, there were no lack of experts at Meridian stage. For himself to be scared out of his wits by an insignificant youngster at foundation establishment, if this matter was spread out, other people would laugh until their teeth fell out. Thinking up to here, shopkeeper Qin suddenly felt irritated. Facing towards the bodyguard behind him, he shouted, "You group of wastes, what are you doing still distractedly standing there? Did you not see this son of a bee injure my son? Still haven't given it to me? Let her be chopped up into a pulp. Whoever gives higher revenge and gives me an inch of her hand will be rewarded with a replenishing spirit pill by me." Saying this, shopkeeper Qin's sinister and resentful gaze looked towards Hershey and coldly said, "Nothing more but an insignificant foundation establishment stage martial artist. You had the courage to come and provoke Jisheng Hall. Today we let you enter with your life, but you won't leave here alive." Having heard what was said, the group of bodyguards loudly answered yes. Quickly, they encircled Hershey. These bodyguards were martial artists hired by Jisheng Hall. The lowest level martial artist was at high-rank foundation establishment stage. Hershey was merely an insignificant and weak youth at foundation establishment stage, How could they be compared? They didn't attach any importance to Hashi. So much so that they didn't even take out their flying swords. Instead, they took out regular swords in passing and turned to rush towards Hashi. After all, regular swords weren't as sharp. So, when cutting a person it would cause the recipient to feel more pain and more torment, they believed that this method would cause this youth suffering and make him cry out in anguish. This would let shopkeeper Chin feel some satisfaction. Hashi looked at the people who encircled her and her eyes held no interest in them. So much so that her mouth evoked a faint smiling expression, as if she were looking at a group of dead people. But very quickly, the smiling expression on her face morphed into a cold killing intent after looking at the waist of the head of the bodyguards. She just saw that the male was no more than 30 years old, his face was 3/4% the same as shopkeeper Chin and Chin Hai's. Hung around this person's waist was a storage bag, and this storage bag was one that Hashi recognized. It was precisely the one that Hashi had gifted to wet nurse Chen. Hashi narrowed her eyes. It was only until the bloodthirsty look in her eyes passed before she fixed her attention onto the male and slowly said, "Be courtyard located on the east side at the foot of Kang Mountain, was it you guys who dared?" Having heard what was said, the head male stopped in his steps. He and shopkeeper Chin turned to look towards each other, laughing out loud. I was still wondering where such a rash youth came from. Unexpectedly, you rushing over to provoke my Ji Sheng Hall was originally for revenge. Shopkeeper Chin narrowed his eyes. With a grave expression he said, "Why would you come here?" "Thanks. Was there not a slip of paper left telling you to go to the residence in the eastern outskirts?" Could it be that the youth standing before him was the brilliant genius Dr. Shi that Dr. Xie told him about? Why would he come to Ji Sheng Hall? Wasn't he supposed to go to Be courtyard in the eastern outskirts? Dr. Shi and the others had already set up a good trap. They were just waiting for her to walk into it. Only, it didn't matter if she didn't go to Be courtyard in the eastern outskirts. It was no problem if she came here as well. It really leaves a memory in someone. This rather die than submit type of people are my favorite. Watching them give up hope and become hatred but be helpless. That appearance is even more satisfying than Fing a big talking young lady. The little brother who had been called a rat immediately started mischievously laughing and said, "How can I not remember? Especially that black and foolish big one. Feng Jie, do you still remember the look on his face when he saw that old lady die? Ha ha ha, thinking about it now is hilarious. I cut off his hands and feet, he even wiggled around on the floor with all his might. Really was the same as a caterpillar, it's too funny. I messed with them so much it was hard for me to kill them." Once the rat's words were said, it immediately caused Qin Feng and his little brothers to burst into laughter. They lacked any worry. In front of Hashi they began to discuss the pleasure they received when brutally killing the group of people in B courtyard. Someone said, "I pulled their intestines out and twisted it around their neck. I watched them get strangled by their own intestines. It really is too interesting." Chapter 369 Optimum Tonic. Someone else said, "What a pity that B courtyard was just full of a group of old smelly men. The women they could play with were just a few ordinary rough servant girls. They would be finished after just playing a few times. If they could play with the soft-skinned and tender servant girl, it would be too good." Qin Feng clicked his tongue and sighed towards Hashi. This little genius doctor looks quite pretty. Soft-skinned and tender flesh, a beauty who's able to overturn cities. Compared to the most beautiful woman in a brothel, you are 30% prettier. Once Dr. Xie learns what he wants to from this person, we'll request for the genius doctor and properly play with him. Younger brothers, does this sound good? After all, today we captured him. This is an achievement. Everyone burst into laughter again. Even the other bodyguards of Ji Sheng Hall were influenced by this atmosphere. Towards Hashi, they kept adding more disdain and ambition. Hashi actually softly laughed. She didn't shallowly sneer, instead, she enchantingly smiled like a demon. She softly and slowly said, "Good, very good. Qin Feng was momentarily lost in her smile and he became distracted. Following which he heard her indifferent voice, that sound was silky and soft. As if it were a feather softly floating in his heart, causing his heart to feel as if he wanted to do something but he lacked the courage to. But his brain kept turning over the words, what does good mean, when suddenly a purple vine that seemed to appear out of nowhere shot in front of him. Without waiting for him to respond, the purple vine wrapped around his chest. The tip of the purple vine softly struck against his thoracic cavity and a pounding heart appeared in front of Qin Feng. Qin Feng's 2 eyes were open wide. It was as if he had seen a ghost as he looked at the purple vine that was constantly rocking in front of him and the live heart pulsing on the vine. The purple vine seemed to be very happy as it swayed around for a while. Suddenly, it shot out a dozen or more other roots. Following that, several sounds sounded out Pu Kai, Puchi as they entered inside Qin Feng's body. Qin Feng only felt a burst of violent pain rack throughout his entire body. Throughout his entire body, there were numerous purple vines inserted inside, but not even a single drop of blood could be seen flowing out. Moreover, what was even scarier, was that within his body all the blood was draining away. No, it wasn't draining away. It was those dozen or more purple vine roots that were swallowing it. Save me. Qin Feng let out a hoarse yell, but when it came out of his mouth, it was so damaged that nobody could hear it clearly. Additionally, the heart in front of him was still swaying about. The purple vine suddenly rolled up. That heart let out a peng sound before abruptly exploding open. Afterward, it was completely absorbed by the purple vine. Qin Feng felt cold from head to toe. Up and down his whole body, he felt bursts of chilly and acute pain. Then, he looked on helplessly as his skin slowly turned old and shriveled up. What was left was just a layer of skin to wrap around the bone. Peng! Loudly sounded. The purple abyss vine had already thrown the completely sucked dry Qin Feng onto the floor. It swayed as it returned back to Hush's side. The leaves on the vine continuously moved around, letting out rustling sounds. This was the purple abyss vine expressing its limitless cheerful emotion. Compared to spiritual energy and magical energy, the thing it loved to do the most was suck up human blood. Martial artists, in particular, had spiritual energy in their blood, which was the optimum tonic for it. It's just a pity that previously, Hashi didn't allow it to randomly suck blood. Adding on to that, the spiritual energy was very abundant in Hush's space, so it wasn't often hungry. As a result, it didn't get to taste very many martial artists' blood. But today Master said, it could play and eat as it wished as long as it was the people inside this room, allowing it to breathe in as it wished. Purple Abyss Vine just finished eating all the man's blood and even swallowed his heart. This taste was truly too splendid. I can foresee how this may cause some issues if she allowed this before, haha. Chapter 370 Terrible Monster. And inside this room, there was still so much delicious food. The more the Purple Abyss Vine thought about it, the more incomparably happy it felt. Master was really a good person. In the blink of an eye, the people who were just talking turned into mummies who were taking their last breaths. This originally amused and boisterous scene suddenly turned sluggish. A large part of the bodyguards had frightened expressions. And Rat, who was the closest to Qin Feng, suddenly came back, screaming, "Big brother!" Rat supported a person up, but all he saw was a mummy with a face full of terror. The skin on the person's entire body was wrinkled together. Except for the skin and bones, there wasn't even a drop of blood inside his body. The two eyes protruded inside the eye socket, holding dread in them. Upon seeing this, Rat immediately opened his eyes wide. Rushing towards Hashi, he yelled out, "Son of a bee, you killed my big brother. I want you to pay with your life." After he said this, he took out a flying sword and advanced towards the people behind him. Snarling, "Everyone, let's unite. Even if that purple vine is difficult to deal with, there's only one person controlling it. If we unite and get rid of him, then we can get revenge for Big Brother." Once everyone came back from the fright, they felt that the words that Rat spoke were correct. Although this youngster was difficult to deal with, he was only at foundation establishment stage. Even if his magical weapon was strong, so what? Don't tell me he could block everyone's attacks. If he used just spiritual energy, at some point it would run low. Thinking up to here, everyone took out their flying sword and quickly launched an attack on Hushi. For a moment, all sorts of flying swords advanced towards Hushi. The screams all mixed together, shaking the earth with its power, causing the entirety of Ji Sheng Hall's shop to shake. All one heard was Hong Long. The place that Hushi was originally standing in got a huge hole smashed into it. Smoke was rising spirals around the surroundings of the hole and dust was flying out. There was also the sound of thunder and lightning crackling and rumbling around the scene. Rat laughed. This sort of attack, if you could still manage to dodge it, then Grandpa, will, after only saying half his sentence, his voice suddenly came to an abrupt stop. His face showed disbelief and alarm. The youth's leisurely and slow voice sounded in his ears, but it sounded as if it was coming from hell. I escaped. What will you do? Hey, you can only die miserably. After the voice fell, Rat's entire body was rigid. Unexpectedly, he was unable to move even one step. The other bodyguards in Ji Sheng Hall were the same as well. It was as if someone cast a body-freezing spell on them. They couldn't move an inch. These bodyguards' faces were filled with fright. When they looked at Hushi, it was as if they were looking at a terrible monster. Clearly, the youth in front of them was only at foundation establishment level. How could he cause them to not even be able to move an inch? Don't tell me that he's a ghost. But, if they all just looked at each other, they would discover that at the back of each of their heads was a tiny silver needle. It was just that these silver needles had a large amount of spiritual power in them. This caused their dantians to stop circulating and the blood in their vessels to stop flowing, causing them to be unable to move or use their spiritual energy. The purple abyss vine was twisted around Hushi's arm. Her fair, white fingertips softly poked at its vines. Towards the people who were unable to move, she faintly smiled. I never liked a sloppy job. Originally when I came here, I was going to give everyone a quick death. But you apparently didn't give me that opportunity. Seeing as you all take pleasure from tyrannizing people, when it comes time for you to be tyrannized, you must be a glutton for punishment. 1. Hong Long, rumbling sound. Chapter 371. Rest in peace. Rat's heart was filled with alarm, but he still loudly shouted. You! In the end, what did you do to us? If you dare to kill all of us, the people behind us won't let you go. Hushi raised her hand and suddenly, the medicinal pill in her hand flew out. The pill landed in Rat's mouth and soon made its way down his esophagus. Seeing as you're so noisy, it seems like you can't wait to often feel the feeling of being tyrannized. You can be at ease, I'll satisfy you. You! What did you give me to eat? Rat didn't get to finish speaking before he suddenly let out a mournful and miserable cry. His entire body resembled a small shrimp, curling up on the floor. The other bodyguards watched as Rat's complexion turned purple. The corner of his mouth was overflowing with blood and foam, so much so that they even thought that Hushi had fed him a highly toxic pill. Just when they were scared witless, they suddenly heard Rat let out a heart-wrenching and lung-tearing scream. He suddenly seemed to go crazy and frantically began clawing at his stomach. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to manage to claw open his stomach. After, he took out all of his internal organs. But this didn't seem to be enough. After taking out all of his intestines, Rat's face was still filled with suffering. He began to use his own 2 hands to pound his legs, hitting the joints. Until finally, he took a flying sword and chopped his own 2 legs off. He kept saying, "Don't bite me, don't bite me." Everyone became stupefied seeing the scene in front of them. Obviously all he had eaten was a pill. Yet this martial artist, who was at the peak of foundation establishment stage, seemed to have gone insane. He cut open his own stomach, cut off his own 2 legs, and repeatedly rammed the joints in his arms into a wall. Even after his bones let out a ka-lolo sound, he still didn't stop. This scene was truly too terrifying. The eyes of the other bodyguards no longer contained hostility and fighting intents, All that was left was desperation. On the other hand, the purple abyss vine was incomparably happy. After receiving Hushy's approval, it quickly rushed over to Rat's side and completely swallowed his flesh. In the blink of an eye, this hellish scene faded away without a trace. It was as if the previously miserable scene didn't even occur in the first place. But the scattered skeletons on the floor and howls of grief echoing in their ears allowed everyone to understand that what occurred just now wasn't some nightmare. From start to finish, Hushy's expression was calm. So calm it was close to coldness. It was only until Rat completely stopped breathing that Hushy lightly threw the medicinal pills in the air. Mildly smiling, she said, "Let me take a look. Who should be my next victim?" Ji Sheng Hall's bodyguards all simultaneously widely opened their eyes and let out gee sounds while shivering. This youth in front of them wasn't human at all. She was a devil. A ruthless spirit who crawled out from the depths of hell. After an hour, inside Ji Sheng Hall's main shop, over a dozen bodies have been disorderly put to rest. 1. The purple abyss vine had eaten until its vine was smooth and round. Swaying and wobbling, it was almost unable to fly. And of those dozen or more bodies, not one hadn't become a mummy with no flesh. In fact, each of those bodies were left with wide open eyes. Each and every pair of eyes were filled with terror and suffering. As if dying still hadn't been able to free them from feeling desperation. If a woman with less guts was viewing this current scene, then there was a chance they would be scared so much that they wouldn't be able to sleep for several months. But as Hushy looked on, her heart didn't move an inch. All she did was blink her eyes a few times and slowly said, "Wet Nurse Chen, you can rest in peace. Hushy has already gotten revenge for you." 1. Over a dozen bodies had been disorderly put to rest. I believe that the scene was basically just a pile of dead bodies randomly put about. Chapter 372 Selfish Appearance finished speaking. At the turn of her wrist, purple abyss vine turned into a purple shadow that entered into the palm of her hand. Turning around, Hushy began to make her way to the corner of the room, towards the back of a screen. Upon hearing the footsteps, shopkeeper Qin and Qin Hai, who were originally hiding behind the screen, seemed to be birds who were startled by the mere twang of a bow. 1. Suddenly lifting up their heads, their faces were full of fright as they looked towards Hushy. You better not come over here. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. If you want something, I'll give it to you. Any of the items inside Ji Sheng Hall can be taken by you. I'm begging you not to kill me." Shopkeeper Qin's voice was filled with fright. Thinking about the anguished wailing of those bodyguards when they were at death's door, he was truly scared. Up until now, he had his doubts. Would they be able to successfully bring together Dr. Xie and this youngster? What were the odds of success? Even Dr. Xie had countless experts lying in wait, because this youth before his eyes was too ruthless, too decisive, and had countless methods. He watched Hushy walking step by step closer to him. The purple abyss vine curled around her wrist lightly swayed around, causing its leaves to create rustling sounds. Shopkeeper Qin couldn't help himself anymore and began to shriek. Taking the son by his side, he ruthlessly tossed him towards Hushy. Having been pushed towards Hushy by shopkeeper Qin, the originally frightened Qin Hai couldn't help but begin to push his entire body towards Hushy. The loyal and protective purple abyss vine didn't wait for Hushy's order before flying out and rolling into Qin Hai's body. The sharp purple vine entered his body with pu sounds. In the blink of an eye, it had already sucked his flesh cleanly and neatly. Upon seeing this scene, Hushy's lips couldn't help but lift up into a taunting sneer. Qin Fu, who just a moment ago was repeatedly shouting that he would take revenge for his son, used that son as a shield in the face of death. In front of life or death, a person's selfish and ugly appearances would come out. Looking at it would really let people feel amused but also disgusted. Shopkeeper Qin staggered along, throwing himself at the front door of the shop and began pounding on the wood door. He even took out his flying sword and began to repeatedly chop at the door, loudly shouting, "Save me! Save me! Someone inside Yangjing City is murdering people." As long as he could run away from Ji Sheng Hall, then he could stay alive. Because martial artists were unable to fly or fight inside Yangjing City. Murdering people was an even more serious crime. And every night, Imperial Guards patrolled every street inside Yangjing City. If he went to cry for help from those Imperial Guards, how could that Shiyu possibly contend against all those Imperial Guards? But, no matter how many times shopkeeper Qin pounded on the wooden door, it didn't budge an inch. Furthermore, he had almost yelled until his throat was hoarse. But the entire time, the outside was quiet, nobody even heard his voice. Even more so, nobody would care about his life or death. A 5th-rank magical purple abyss vine at its peak would have a strength that was equivalent to a martial artist who was at the summit of Gold Core stage. Compared to Qin Fu, who was merely at Foundation Establishment stage, how could he possibly break the enchantment that Purple Abyss Vine had put down? Frightened, Qin Fu urgently turned his head. He wanted to run inside the courtyard and escape through the courtyard's walls. But just when he ran 2 steps, his entire body was enveloped by a purple vine and was firmly held in the air. Hush's icy cold voice sounded out, "Tell me, who incited the matters in Kang Mountain's B courtyard? If you honestly and clearly answer, I can still give you a quick death." Shopkeeper Qin was suspended in the air by Purple Abyss Vine. He felt the purple vine's sharp vines continuously moving around his body. This scared him until he pissed his pants, snot and tears rolled down his face. "Spare me. Spare me, genius Dr. Shi. It wasn't me. This matter wasn't done by me, it has no relation to me. I'm only Ji Sheng Hall's shopkeeper, I don't know anything. 1. Birds who are startled by the mere twang of a bow, someone who frightens easily, possibly due to previous experiences. Chapter 373 Eastern Outskirts. Other courtyard. Hush's mouth lifted into a faint smile. "Don't know." She talked extremely slowly, but just when she just finished speaking the purple vine suddenly came out. After a whooshing sound, shopkeeper Qin's hand had been nailed to the wall. Shopkeeper Qin let out howls that resembled those of a pig who was being slaughtered. Fishy-smelling water kept incessantly coming out of the crotch in his trousers, letting out di sounds. Hushi softly stroked the foliage of the purple abyss vine wrapped around her wrist. She quietly said, "This is your last chance. If you don't say anything, I'll give you a medicinal pill. I trust that you saw the way your subordinates died. Do you want to experience the feeling of digging out your own stomach and digging out your intestines? I'll talk. I beg of you not to feed me that pill, woo. Shopkeeper Qin had long been scared out of his wits and didn't dare to hide even a little bit of information. It was Dr. Xie. It was Dr. Xie who brought people to B Courtyard. From the day that the both of you fought, he had been searching for you. But I don't know what he wants to find you for. All I know is that he's determined to win the secret methods on your hands from you. But these matters truly have nothing to do with me. I'm merely a shopkeeper who sells pills, I don't know anything. I'm begging you, young hero, to be a big person with big generosity. 1. Let me off. I'm begging you to let me off. Dr. Xie." It was the arrogant 3rd-rank doctor from the day she saved Xiao Li's older brother. Then it seems like that day when coming to Massacre B Courtyard, they truly took away Xiao Li. It must have been to take the secret repairing broken muscles and tendons medical method in her hand. However, it was just for such an insignificant prescription that they went as far to cruelly murder the people of B Courtyard, allowing wet nurse Chen to experience a violent death. Dr. Xie. Xie Chongming. Very good. Very, very good. Where is Dr. Xie? Shopkeeper Qin's voice trembled. Xie. Dr. Xie is in a residence in the eastern outskirts. People are waiting there for you to walk into the trap, to ambush you. Dr. Xie is also there. Sure enough, he had set up a good trap inside the residence at the eastern outskirts, just waiting for her to jump in. Hush's mouth secretly curved coldly. The little Gunyang that you guys took, where is she? Shopkeeper Qin opened his mouth, just as he was about to speak the purple vine rustled about and arrived at his stomach. The sharp purple vine softly rubbed against his clothes, seeming to act as if it could plunge inside him at any moment. Shopkeeper Chin was frightened stiff. He no longer concealed thoughts he originally wanted to hide. Chapter 374 Massacre of an Entire Family. Hashi took the craft paper. Glancing at it, she discovered that the drawing on it resembled the design of a building, and sure enough, there was a symbol marking the entrance and location of the basement. And that jade slip was actually the key to opening the basement. After shopkeeper Chin handed over the map and jade slip, he warily watched Hashi. His voice trembled. "You agreed with me. As long as I handed you the map, you wouldn't kill me." "Naturally." Hashi walked outside as she stored away the map. Behind her back, shopkeeper Chin's face exposed a sinister smile. The map had poison on it. The moment the poison made contact with blood, the person's throat would seal up. 1. You just had to damage a little bit of skin and you would be injured. Just moments prior, he saw Hashi's finger brush past a sharp point coated with poison. It was just that, he didn't detect it at all. Or, he simply didn't care for these small wounds. In the end, it was just a careless and inexperienced youth. He was still able to trick him with such a trap. Just by walking 2 steps out of the door, this youth would lose consciousness and fall to the floor. Additionally, the poison would completely engulf this youth's spiritual energy. Now he just had to wait to capture that youth and take him to Dr. Xie to take credit for his work. But Hashi, who was a step away from exiting, suddenly stopped in her tracks. Slowly turning around, she exposed a hidden smile. "Are you guessing that, as long as I step out a step, the extremely poisonous 7 steps intoxication on my body would flare up?" He discovered it. Unexpectedly, he had long since found out, and even found out that it was the 7 steps intoxication. Cold killing intent quickly flashed through Hush's eyes, then disappeared. The purple abyss vine on her wrist came out as if it was a phantom. Shopkeeper Chin's eyes were wide open and he frantically shouted out, "You said that you wouldn't kill me." The purple abyss vine quickly pierced into his skull. Inside his skull, it turned around in a circle before it unwillingly returned to Hashi. And Chin's shopkeeper, who was previously kicking up a racket, now had a foolish expression on his face and continuously kept laughing. His entire body no longer had any trace of spiritual energy and his eyes were empty. He was clearly already an idiot. Hashi withdrew the purple abyss vine and slowly said, "I did say I wouldn't kill you because letting you live this way, compared to dying. This is far more interesting." Saying this, Hashi's long and thin finger spun around in the air. In the blink of an eye, the purple abyss vine seemed to have received a command. In an instant, it flew up and turned into a purple phantom, entering inside her body. After about an hour passed, people finally discovered that there were frightened shrieks coming from Jisheng Hall. Chapter 375 Abandoned Haunted House. After leaving Jisheng Hall, Hashi never stopped advancing towards the other courtyard in Yangjing City's eastern outskirts. Inside Yangjing City, you couldn't fly with your sword, so Hashi exhausted her Qinggong. At Shushu 1, Hashi was able to see the area 3 li north of the eastern outskirts. A small unremarkable hill sat here. An official road led up to the eastern side of this hill, but because it was night time, people on the road had long since been scarce. On the west side of the hill, there was a house that seemed to be particularly gloomy and shabby. From far away, in the dark night, one could only see a yellow piece of paper that was stuck to black painted doors. The piece of paper fluttered about in the wind whenever it blew. There weren't any decorations at the door, nor was there a plaque. Even the eaves were sunken in, exposing a fist-sized hole. The whole house seemed to have merged into one with the surrounding night. Just by looking at it would cause someone to feel a type of gloomy cold. If an ordinary person were to be walking along this official road and happened across this residence, they would definitely think this was an abandoned haunted house. They wouldn't have any interest in checking this house out. The white moon brocade robe Hashi was wearing had already been changed into agile black clothes. She didn't use any spiritual energy, just her qigong to jump over the wall. All her actions were soundless, even the bats hanging on the eaves weren't disturbed by her presence. Using the map Hashi took from shopkeeper Chin, Hashi quickly made her way through the house. And along this road, Hashi saw many martial artists hidden inside the house. At the very least, they were at high-rank foundation establishment stage. Every one of them was holding their breath and concealing themselves in the main courtyard, seeming as if they were patiently waiting for something. What surprised Hashi the most was the fact that this entire residence was separated by a boundary. The front yard was eerie. The martial artists were all hidden in secret places, not speaking and not moving, while the backyard was filled with patrolling martial artists. At times, one could even hear their boisterous laughter and conversation. The map shopkeeper Chin gave her indicated that the location of the basement was in the backyard. This allowed Hashi to be convinced just a bit more of this map's authenticity. Relying on the Purple Abyss Vine's unique ability, Hashi was able to quickly break through the boundary and travel through the backyard's various houses. In the time it took to burn a stick of incense, she was finally able to locate the basement's entrance, which was similar to an ancestral hall. The simple jade slip was lightly inserted into the notch at the entrance of the basement. The guard was clearly shocked and stuttered, "Xie. Dr. Xie, you. Why would you be here at this time? Aren't you supposed to be at the front? Presumptuous." Hashi's strict voice said. The loud voice and intonation were exactly the same as Dr. Xie's voice. "Whatever I want to do and wherever I want to be, when is it your turn to ask me questions? And you still haven't quickly opened the door." "Yes, yes." The guard no longer dared to tarry and immediately went to press a mechanism on the other side of the door. As the iron door opened, ka sounds were heard, but before the guard could clearly see Dr. Xie's appearance, a purple shadow suddenly came out. Only pu was heard as the guard felt a burst of sharp pain on his neck. He didn't even have time to groan before he dropped to the floor, severing any opportunity to live anymore. Hashi closed the iron door and took off the disguise on her face. Her footsteps were noiseless as she began advancing forward. The further she walked in, the more pungent the stinky and bloody smell became, causing one to feel even more nauseous. After walking approximately 2 more steps, Hashi heard the coarse voice of a male. "Why place rotten flesh here at the intersection? Just looking at it spoils one's appetite. Why haven't you quickly tossed it to a corner?" Soon after, another person's laughing voice answered, "This isn't some rotten flesh, they're clearly still alive. It's just that, the pain and suffering of being alive is much worse than being dead." Hashi's figure flashed like a phantom. Soon after, she was hidden inside a corner, looking towards a not-so-distant place. This place was clearly a prison. At this time, it was brightly lit and there were several men dressed in black clothing and holding weapons, guarding the prison. There were also some males who wore strange totems on their clothing, gathering together in 2s and 3s as they looked after something. It wasn't obvious what they were studying. From Hush's point of view, she could only clearly see the 2 men who were just speaking. They seemed to be about 30 or 40 years old and they were at Meridian stage. At this moment, there was a short and stout male among these people. His coarse and short hand held a piece of fur, turning it over up and down and left and right, suspiciously saying, "Are you sure this is the fur of a 9-tailed fox? How come this looks nearly the same as an ordinary beast's fur to me?" Another thin and tall male saw his actions and became shocked. At once, he threw himself at the fox fur and carefully took it back, unhappily saying, "You be a bit more careful, okay? This is genuine fox fur. In the entirety of Miluo continent, nobody can take out a second one as fresh and intact as this one." If you were to take this to the market to sell, even if it was a 9th-rank magic weapon, you could exchange this for 8 or 10 of them. Do you understand? 8 or 10 9th-rank magic weapons. The short and stout guard was scared silly. The eyes looking upon the nine-tailed fox fur immediately became 70% more passionate. The thin and tall male carefully stored the nine-tailed fox fur inside a jade box and mischievously laughed. Of course, it's because of the fact that this nine-tailed fox fur is so precious that Elder Jiang has instructed you and me to come down here and skin this fox. You know, out of all the experts in Jiang Manor, the two of us are the best at skinning the skin, off the prisoners. This time, you and I have made such a large contribution. When Elder Jiang evaluates us, he'll surely bestow countless rewards to the two of us. When the short and stout heard these words, he immediately felt proud of himself and laughed. That's only natural, we're even able to skin off human skin completely and fully without any part of the skin receiving any damage. Don't even mention this small fox. After saying this, he picked up a stick and poked the meatball. Are you certain that this little fox is still alive? The previous people who had their skin peeled off only lived for 2 hours. Seeing that the time they were suffering and in pain didn't last long, your daddy, out of sorts. That's correct. Next to them was a meatball that was dripping with blood. The meatball's entire body didn't have any fur on it and it was lightly twitching. If one didn't carefully look at it, they truly wouldn't be able to tell that this was a living animal, forget about it even being a nine-tailed fox. The tall and thin male's face held a "you idiot" expression as he laughed. Don't look at the bloody ball in this moment. Don't forget, this is a nine-tailed fox. Do you think that their magical ability and power can be compared to some insignificant and ordinary person? Feel at ease, even if we put her under the scorching sun for 3 days and 3 nights, she won't die. Only this feeling is definitely 100 times more painful than dying. He, the short and stout guard's face had an excited expression. After Elder Jiang gets those extinct methods from that so-called genius doctor, it would be better to take this little fox out and let the sun shine on it. Up until now, I still remember the miserable shrieks the fox emitted when we were skinning her. This sound is truly too wonderful. It's even more exciting than torturing 100 people. The tall and thin guard's eyes were also filled with light, but he shook his head. Forget it, don't even dream about it. This is a nine-tailed spirit fox, its fur isn't the only valuable item on it. All the flesh and bones on its body are treasured objects. Elder Jiang specifically instructed that her body couldn't have any damage. If you truly tossed this little fox aside and let it die, then just wait and see how Elder Jiang will punish you. Fine. Got it. The short and stout guard's enthusiasm waned. But thinking about this little fox's origins, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. I didn't expect Dr. Xie's luck to be so good. The hostage he randomly took turned out to be a nine-tailed fox. Wait for that young genius doctor to be captured. Dr. Xie's achievements will turn big profits, perhaps the entire family will even receive rewards. Can Dr. Xie's awesomeness compare to Elder Jiang's? The thin and tall guard sneered. With one look, Elder Jiang was able to tell that this little Gunyang was a nine-tailed fox. Moreover, in a short amount of time, he was able to turn her submissive. There wasn't even an opportunity for her to use the self-exploding enchanted pill. Naturally. The short and stout guard laughed. Who is Elder Jiang, whether it's medical expertise or cultivation stage, his number one. Most of all, opening up this underground test pharmacy, it's truly too much like my heart's intention. But saying this little fox's age is so small, but her temper is truly fierce. If it weren't for Elder Jiang's vigilance, she would have been able to use the self-exploding enchanted pill. If that was really the case, our entire prison and test pharmacy would be finished. Zee. This is merely a little fox who grew a tail. Unexpectedly, it's so difficult to deal with. If it were to grow 9 tails, then it would be even more difficult. The tall and thin man also had some lingering fears and shook his head. If it becomes even a little bigger, I'm not sure we can handle it. So, our luck is too good. In this world, there are very few nine-tailed spirit foxes. If we allow them to grow up, even mighty nascent soul stage martial artists would be unable to deal with them, let alone us. Unfortunately, this little fox has only recently changed into human form. To add on to that, it didn't run away in order to risk its life to protect the people inside B courtyard. If not, she could have run off into the mountains and fields. Based on a fox's agility, we wouldn't be able to easily find her. I really didn't know that this fox is clearly a witch. Why would it risk its life to protect those lowly people? If not, it wouldn't have been so easily captured. It really is too stupid, ha ha ha. The two men simultaneously burst into laughter. But before they finished laughing, they suddenly became quiet. The two people only felt a slight pain on their neck before a purple vine quietly wound around them. Catching them off guard, it suspended the two people high up in the air. The two people's faces showed shock, but they weren't frightened at all. From head to toe, their spiritual energy was suddenly set free. The short and stout guard already began shouting. Who launched a sneak attack? Come out for your daddy. But, just as his words were said, both men discovered that something wasn't right. They realized that the 10 square meters surrounding them was enveloped in a layer of a purple enchanted boundary. Inside this enchantment, they found out that their spiritual energy was restricted and their voices couldn't be transmitted out. And at this moment, all the people inside the prison were occupied with their own matters. Nobody bothered with what was happening at this side of the prison. The two men's faces finally had some fear in it and their eyes were filled with confusion. As they violently struggled, they also shouted until their throats were hoarse. What does partial credit count for? If you have the skill, then come out and fight with your daddy. As soon as his voice fell, the figure of a woman appeared from the darkness. The pretty, seemingly moonlit complexion opposed the prison which reeked of blood. But, her dark and icy eyes seemed somewhat crueler than this dark prison. You, what sort of person are you? The thin and tall man raised his voice and yelled, how did you get in here? Hashi didn't pay any mind to the two hollering people. Instead, she step by step walked to the corner that the meatball had been thrown into. Air grazed against it as blood dripped off the furless body, causing it to shudder from pain. The hands resting by Hashi's side suddenly clenched and her fingernails dug into the hollow of her palm. Blood dripped from her fingers, but she took no notice of it. A scene from her previous life appeared in front of her eyes. She was in a heap of garbage. After rummaging through it, she finally found her Didi's body. He didn't have an intact skull or a thin body. There were only entirely broken remains. That sort of despair, pain, and overwhelming hatred was something Hashi wouldn't ever forget in her lifetime. After that, she abandoned all emotion and forgot all her dreams. With all her might, she began to become stronger so that her hopes could no longer have that sort of despair. After reincarnating, she thought that she was strong enough. That she could protect whoever she wanted to protect. But in the end, she couldn't do anything well. She lost wet Nurse Chen, she lost that warm family. Now, did she also have to lose Xiao Li? Hashi slowly lowered her body. She wanted to carry Xiao Li, but her shaking hands didn't even dare to touch her. Because she knew that without the protection of fur, her skin was naked and exposed. This was a kind of suffering and torture. Even being touched by air would cause her to feel so much pain it wouldn't want to live, let alone being touched by her hand or clothes. And at this moment, the tall and thin man who was suspended midair suddenly came back to his senses and yelled, You are that young genius doctor. Aren't you supposed to be in the front yard? Why have you appeared here? The light in Hush's eyes dimmed as dark raging flames dyed her glassy black eyes. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.